Okay, yeah? Okay. Sorry. Welcome everybody to our series, The Global War on Black People. Before we get started, we are going to open up with song, and then we will go through interpretation and translation. Así que bienvenidos y bienvenidas, bienvenides a nuestra conversación, la guerra contra la gente y la población negra. Antes de empezar, vamos a abrir con canción para abrir el espacio. Entonces, María, a ver si lo explicas en portugués. Estás en mute.
Olá a todas, sejam muito bem-vindas. Antes de começarmos, colocaremos uma música agora, um vídeo, e logo após daremos boas-vindas para os panelistas dessa conversa de hoje.
Me deixa cuidar do meu menino, me deixa ensinar o meu menino a se amar, me deixa abraçar o meu menino, sem o sorriso dele eu vou chorar. Oh mamãe, cadê você? Oh filho, tô trabalhando. Oh mamãe, onde cê tá? Meu filhinho, tô carregando o peso do mundo aqui nas costas. Já tô indo te encontrar. A mamãe guerreira tá na rua, lutando pra respirar. Me deixa cuidar do meu menino, pretinho, pretinho. Meu sopro de vida é meu menino, pretinho, pretinho. Se você olhar pro meu menino, vai ver que ele brilha mais que o sol. Não sei como pode o ser humano dos meninos não ter dó. Me deixa cuidar do meu menino, pretinho, pretinho. Meu sopro de vida é meu menino, pretinho, pretinho. Se você olhar pro meu menino, vai ver que ele brilha mais que o sol. Não sei como pode o ser humano dos meninos não ter dó. Oh mamãe, deixa eu dizer, essa culpa não é sua. Oh mãezinha, venha cá, seu sorriso é dom, é cura. Iabá, 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 iabá. Quem é que cuida da mamãe? Quem é que cuida do menino? Quem é que cuida do papai? Se a branca paz não vê menino. Me deixa cuidar do meu menino. Meu sopro de vida é meu menino. Se você olhar pro meu menino, vai ver que ele brilha mais que o sol. Não sei como pode o ser humano dos meninos não ter dó.
Thank you very much. La artista se llama Jessica Gaspar. The singer's name is Jessica Gaspar. And I'll...
yeah, that's right.
If everybody could mute themselves, that would be great. I'm gonna open up with the Marie is gonna open up with the interpretation piece, and then I'm gonna translate, and then I'm gonna give the meaning to the song. Voy a abrir, Marie va a abrir con las instrucciones de interpretación primero, y después voy a continuar dando significado a la canción y abrir el espacio.
Hello, family. Welcome. Welcome. My name is Marie Ferreira. I am a communications coordinator at AfroResistance, and I will be providing some technical support with the interpretation. Olá, família, meu nome é Marie Ferreira, eu vou dar algum suporte técnico com interpretação. Eu vou primeiro explicar em inglês e novamente eu volto para explicar em português. This conversation will be in English with simultaneous interpretation in Portuguese and Spanish. If you don't speak English and you need the interpretation, please check the button called interpretation in your computer. If you do speak English, if you understand English, there is no action required from you, and you can access the interpretation in your phone or in your computer. If you're on your phone, click in the three buttons called More, and then select the language service, and then interpretation, and mute the original audio. And then you'll be able to hear the interpreters. Olá, família! Essa conversa será em inglês, com interpretação em espanhol e português. Se você fala em inglês, não tem nenhuma ação requerida de você. Se você prefere ouvir essa conversa em português ou em espanhol, e está no seu computador, você pode acessar o botão interpretação, que está bem na borda da sua tela, e selecionar a sua língua de preferência. Se você está no seu celular, clique nos três pontos chamados mais or more, e aí seleciona interpretação ou linguagem, coloca o áudio original no mudo e seleciona português. Okay. Se você tiver alguma dúvida, alguma questão relacionada à interpretação, eu vou estar disponível no chat e respondendo qualquer pergunta. If you have any questions or concerns regarding interpretation, I will be here in the chat and I can help you out. Unfortunately, there is no interpretation available on Facebook, so if you are on Facebook, you must access this conversation via Zoom. Infelizmente, não temos opções de interpretação via Facebook, então se você está nos assistindo e quer interpretação, você precisa acessar pelo Zoom, pelo link disponível na Facebook da página da AfroResistance.
Okay. Muchas gracias a Marie. A Marie explicó un ratito las instrucciones para interpretación. Estamos dando interpretación a español y a portugués. Si entienden inglés, no tienen que hacer nada. Todas las panelistas hoy van a hablar en inglés. Si están en Facebook y entienden inglés, no tienen que hacer nada, porque todas las panelistas van a estar hablando en inglés. Pero si está en Facebook y necesita traducción a español o portugués, tiene que entrar por el enlace de Zoom que está en nuestra página de Facebook. Para acceder a interpretación, tienen que hacer clic en los tres puntitos en la mano derecha, en la esquina de la mano derecha arribita. Hay tres puntitos y ahí pueden hacer clic en más o more, y ahí está la sala de interpretación. Si que haga clic en español o en portugués, y ahí será traducida por Fernanda en portugués o Swahili en español. Eso es todo lo que tienen que hacer. Y ahí estarán ya dispuestas. I will be speaking in English moving forward. So if you're on Facebook and you need interpretation, if you're on Facebook and you can't understand us, please join us via Zoom. Si está en Facebook y no nos entiende, por favor, conéctese vía Zoom para recibir la interpretación. As in any other workshop, if we're doing it face-to-face, it'll be great to see your faces. If you can, please turn on your camera, because we work on energy here. So you give us energy the same way that we give you energy. So if possible, share your camera with us. It just helps to keep the energy moving and interactive as well. It's the same as we're trying for it to be the same as a face-to-face gathering. So the song that was just played had to do with children, and we are dedicating this song specifically to, we're dedicating this gathering today specifically to Miguel Octavio and his mother, Mirtes Renata. Miguel was a little boy that did not have to die. He died at the negligence of a white woman who his mother had to work for, despite the pandemic that we are facing right now in Brazil. And unfortunately, he died just a really tragic death at her hand. He fell off a building and passed away and it shouldn't happen. It is, people are calling it negligence, but it's not negligence. It's deeper than that. It is racism. It is blatant racism. And it's a devaluement of Black bodies and Black lives at all ages. If you want more information, the Quilomba Collective have put on their webpage on Facebook, they have put information about it. And Quilomba is spelled with a K, ILOMBA Collective, and you can take a look on Facebook. So we have organized these calls because, as we all know, there's a global war on Black people right now that we can see is evident from the rest of the world and the manifestations. And you know, the systematic killing of Black people in the United States, in Brazil, Colombia, Panama, Honduras, you name a country, there's this systematic, disproportionate killing of Black bodies throughout the diaspora have outraged our communities. And these are a series of conversations that are going to highlight our global resistance, but also our collective love, our existence, and our historical strategies. The speakers that have been invited today do not have a formal presentation. They're bringing their full selves to the table because this is a space where they're openly, and we are going to openly share our thoughts and feelings and to really create an intentional international communities. So the people that have been invited today are basically going to share with us what they're facing, what they're feeling, what hopes there are, what strategies. It's basically a conversation in Spanish. Sometimes we call it comadreo. It's a sister to sister conversation. Today we are accompanied by Charo Mina Rojas from Colombia, with Dominique from the United States, Dr. Joia Crear-Perry from the United States as well, Janisha Gabriel from the United States, and I'll be facilitating Janvieve Williams. And we'll be posting bios on the side because these women don't need so much introduction, and it's not a formal panel. It's more of a conversation. So we'll get started with Dr. Perry. If you could just share what's on your mind. What you've been with us before.
Yeah.
You'll be with us again.
I hope
share
so.
with us what's going on. What are you feeling? What do you see is going to happen?
Yeah. I tell you what, I wanted to try to clear my schedule just because I love being in this space with you all and being in community with you all. And I don't have that opportunity so much. A lot of my life is spent in spaces that are that I'm fighting with people, fighting for Black freedom, fighting for Black liberation, being one of a few people of color, a few Black women in the room. It can be very heavy. And so on my mind is a feeling of excitement and joy that I knew I would see your beautiful faces from around the world today, and our connected ability to build a movement together that's a global movement, because global anti-Blackness is what's killing us all. And it's not, and I learn so much when I'm with you, and I feel awful that I have a funder meeting. So it's also this how capitalism works, right? Like I can't be with you because I have to try to have funding to keep doing the work. And that makes, it just reinforces how we don't ever get to really just be free. And our children don't get to just be free. What would it look like if we could all just be free? So, but thank you for allowing me to be in this space, even if it's for a short time, and I hope that I get to be with you again. So thank you.
Okay, so we will move now to Dominique Day.
Hi, I want to really echo what I heard Dr. Joia say, because I feel very much the same. It's a massive privilege to join you, and also to be invited into this endeavor of creating, as you say, an intentional international community, of thinking through what our commitments look like So I have a lot of hope, but to be honest, I also, I'm a little bit just impressed with your generation and what you all have done just in this moment. And, I've heard, I may have actually even said a few things about millennials in the past, but I think you've really proven that the transformational energy in this world right now is being held by all of you. And I am so privileged to just find ways to listen, to hear, to support, and hopefully to be of service in that mission.
Thank you, thank you. Charo?
Well, thank you for, I had to put the fun, and I got dry suddenly. Well, thank you, Janvieve, and all of you for putting this together and being here and sharing, really. I had a lot on my mind right now, really a lot. And with everything that is happening in the United States and around the world and everything that happens in Colombia, for me is the need to really focus on how we really make this opportunity something that turn into something really transformative. Mm-hmm. I don't know if these are my 5 minutes, Janvieve, or is to stay in the intro.
Dale.
¿Le doy con todo?
Dale, dale.
Thank you. I got water.
So we have to hydrate. If folks don't have water, please go and get your water.
Right. I'm going to share, I did actually put, because I'm very visual and I need to like tell of this out here. I put a few pictures. I shared some images from here also to just show how it feels here and what happens here. So I'm going to share this. Let me see, I did it wrong. Let me just share briefly. What is the share?
The share?
I shrink the screen, so I lost the share.
At the bottom of your screen?
Yeah, I know. It's just that I shrink it and disappear. Okay, so I want to share these 4 ideas. I picked this picture because I think that what I feel when I see the pictures that I will show later, and I think what is happening here. I think that we have to go beyond George Floyd and be thinking that this is racism and be naming it and really talking about how racism kills, ¿no? Mata, realmente mata y nos está matando. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking on this as state violence and not just the person, the police, the institution, but this is a state violence. And that we need to think on brutalization, how police brutalize and the system brutalize us and our bodies, but also talk about racist violence, because there are so many ways and forms of being affected by many forms of violence against us. And I will show, that's why I want to show a few pictures. I think that if we don't see this as a continuity, the historical context, that this is not from now, that this has been forever, and that people don't understand, or at least take into account that this is not just George Floyd, but also so many women killed, that we don't name. We are not going to reach that level of transformation that we are thinking on it. So for me, all this issue of oppression linked to the social, the power relationships that are based, and I'm pretty sure I made up this word, made up word in Spanish anyway, the biologizados, the I can't even say it, you can read that. But it's the fact that race and gender was created with this idea that biologically we are absolutely nothing compared to human beings. And I bring this forth because it is important that we also talk about the component of gender in this situation. And it's killing me that we are not mentioning women that have been killed and brutalized by police also. So I just wanted to point and share that we have this police brutality. This young man, Anderson Arboleda, was just killed last week by a police. In the context of COVID, he was outside. We shouldn't be outside. It's not like the United States. We have specific days we can be outside. He was outside of his house, and police have no problem on hitting him in his face with the bat. And he was okay for a few hours, and then he collapsed, he got in coma, and he died. He was killed. But then we have also the extrajudicial killings of people that has been killed by militaries, by the state, and pointed out as guerrilla members, and no justice for that. And here we have the women. I picked few of the women that I know have been killed in the United States, but we have many, many women leaders and women killed in this country every single day, brutalized, they are mutilated, they are raped, they are disappeared, they are tortured, and we don't talk about them. And we should be on the streets screaming their names. And then why I want to think on this coloniality, this place of coloniality for two reasons. These are images, this on the right, the white women. Some magazine wanted to honor women on a March 8th some years ago. And the picture they chose for the magazine was that on the right with white women, with black women dressed on these uniforms serving food. But the response to that picture was black women naked with the ¿cómo se llama? Belleza, you know, the European features and all this, yeah. with white women in the back, dressed up with uniforms and holding food, right? So what this tells us? That we have a goddamn colonized mind. And we don't understand really what racism is. And we don't understand the implications of patriarchy and gender on this. And we don't put together wanted to understand that we are here also being violent against these black women, the same way that that magazine did there. And then here is all this that happens in Colombia. I want to point out the economic policies that constantly put us at risk and kill us. That's why I make responsible the state. The racist people, you may read, the ones that read in Spanish here, this white guy on the right lower side, that was insulting a black woman. This was last month. And with all these words, you know, dirty and disgusting and damn and all these things. But then the black faces. This, by the way, up here on the right up side is the Prime Minister of Canada, no? So we you know, here is this sign up here is in Popayán, a white city here, colonial city in Colombia. And these signs were appearing after we did a huge mobilization in Colombia, and signs like this was start showing up with the Kill the N-word. Magazines also honoring black women that come with the front page with a white woman dressing on African outfits. And but they did picture black women, but all of them were inside. But this is the front page. Well, it was actually only her, the front page. But then it's the genocide that we feel, and we call it genocide because it disappeared us, killed us with the census. We have 2005, 10% of the population. We insist that we are over 20% of the population in Colombia. In 2018, we were only 4.6% of the population. What happened from 2005 to 2018? When we killed, disappeared, or suddenly we were afraid or embarrassed or call ourselves Black, Afro-descendant, Afro-Colombian. And then this, which is really the part that is really makes sick my stomach, because that they are taking our symbols and we are allowing our symbols to be taken, to me really enraged. Really makes me very angry. And I have to put this picture because this is the play of coloniality and these forms that we are living today, where they play morality and they play repression at the same time, right? And here is Pelosi and all these white people, Blacks were there too, playing the morality, pretending that this is democracy, that they care about us, that there is gonna be some kind of change, right? While down there is police continued killing. This is an 6-year-old girl on the left, the one on the red, that was arrested by police from a school. The one on the right is a 14-year-old girl. Those are United States, but we have the same here. Arrested, brutally arrested, and you see the knee, where the knee of the police is. So we have to be really stopping this parade. We cannot allow these people to use and take our symbols to demobilize us and to silence us. And I find this very, very dangerous. So finally, I have to say that for us, the exclusion that is happening and has been happening historically as part of this genocide that we are feeling, that is not necessarily bloody, but it's happening. And we gotta pay attention to it. So that is all my bunch of things about this situation.
Thank you, Charo. So we'll get into a conversation after everybody speaks. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat for now until later on that we'll get into a dialogue. And I would like to bring up Janisha, Gabriel, that is here, right here in the Bronx, close to me.
Right here in the Boogie Down Bronx.
Yes.
Wow, it's such an honor to share space with Black people, especially Black people internationally. I think that despite the ways in which technology surveils us, I think it's given us such a great opportunity just to see each other and be with each other. So I'm honored to be here. Janvieve, thank you for inviting me. I think the thing that is on my mind now, that is always on my mind, is what does it take for us as Black people to be free globally? And I've been so deeply moved by the protests that we've seen. I love seeing the resistance and like the burning of cars and burning of buildings. And I'm like shouting from my room, yes. And at the same time, I will admit that I feel a twinge of animosity at the erasure of Black women's narratives from these protests. And I think I also feel a deep sense of frustration at the erasure of the narratives of Black, queer, and trans people who have been murdered by the police. I think hopefully everyone here knows that a Black transgender man named Tony McDade was murdered by police recently. And I don't hear his name being lifted up by anyone, really. You know, a few people have lifted it up. Obviously, the Black LGBT community is talking about it. But his narrative is not part of a mainstream narrative. And that combined with the continued erasure of Black women, and I think the centering of state violence on Black cisgender heterosexual men's bodies, to me, is also a form of state violence. It reflects the ways in which we have interpreted in our minds that, you know, a certain form of manhood is what we should strive towards. And to me, that's nothing more than a reflection of like the white male supremacy that we live under. And so my driving passion as an organizer and an activist is to have conversations about the ways in which we as Black people must eradicate the state from our own minds and hearts in order to be free. Because I think that fighting the police is really great. And we also have issues to handle in our communities. And so a free Black world, in my opinion, is one in which we are dedicated to love, in which we can all be seen and heard and valued. So I was having a conversation with Anna actually earlier this week, and we were talking about the statistical numbers from Brazil that state that one Black Brazilian is murdered every 23 minutes. Is this for me? What are you saying? Slow down.
Slow down.
I'm talking too fast? Okay. Okay, Anna and I were talking about the statistic that says that one Black Brazilian is murdered every 23 minutes. And we were talking about the reality that most people believe that that statistic means that one Black Brazilian is murdered by the police every 23 minutes. But in reality, those murders are happening primarily in communities similar to the United States. So in this moment, I think my driving passion is for us to have a broader conversation about police violence and or state violence actually, and to understand that state violence exists beyond policing, that poverty is a result of state violence, and that any of the crimes, if you will, that we commit in our community that are the result of poverty are still state violence. My analysis is that any violence that a Black person faces is a form of state violence. It doesn't matter if it comes from the police, if it comes from a neighbor. If we have interpreted the ways in which Black bodies are devalued, then it's still a form of state violence that we have to attack. So that sits with me in this moment. I have been working on a project for many years, documenting violence against Black women and girls, specifically murders, and specifically to track statistics and trends and find out what is happening with this femicide of Black women and girls that we see. And the unfortunate reality that I've come to is that most Black women and girls are murdered by a male, right, in the community. And so my passion is to say, what can we do with Black men? How are we gonna heal collectively? And what can we do together to make sure that we value ourselves in the ways that we need for this freedom that we want to attain? That's what I'm feeling it right now.
Thank you so much, Janisha. Again, if you have comments or questions, please put them on the side. And we're gonna come back to Dominique now. If you wanna share where you're at, you know, what you've been feeling.
Yeah, thank you, Janvieve, and thank everybody who's spoken so far, because this is already a really rich and powerful conversation. And I think I want to pick up a little bit on just what was said earlier about the way that our symbols are being appropriated, the way that people are performing solidarity almost as a way to deprive us of power in this moment, as a way to say, to appease people and say, well, look, we're wearing kente cloth, so, you know, we're down. And I guess I'd ask you, what is the appropriate metaphor for this moment? And so I think you all know I sit on the UN working group of experts on people of African descent, and we've recently put out a statement really uplifting the fact, and I'm saying metaphor, but I think it's really fact, that what we're looking at in a lot of these cases are modern day lynchings, that the characteristics of lynching, and of course, I think this is a word that's known outside the American context, but if not, you know, there's a historical context of the ways in which Black bodies were controlled through the use of racial terror, including these group, public, depraved types of murders, tarring people, burning people, hanging people. And what we see, right, we talk about the characteristics of a lynching, we see impunity, this idea that you can do this with no consequences, no negative consequences whatsoever. We see public use of, public spaces to ensure the message of racial control is disseminated, is broadcast as widely as possible. We see broad daylight activities that are taking place openly and in defiance of the law. And we see real depravity, right? We see deaths that are not just murders, but murders that involve real cruelty and an attempt to inspire fear and terror, not just in the person who is the victim of the murder, but in the entire community. And this is what we've seen in not just the non-state murders we've experienced lately, but also the police murders. And I really want to uplift what Janisha said about all of these are state murders. All of these are occurring under color of state law. All of these involve either the implicit or the explicit acceptance that our lives should be used to facilitate this idea of control, of order, of implacable and unpenetrable white supremacy. So we include in that space Tony McDade, we include in that space Breonna Taylor, right? Even though these were police actions, and maybe even more so because they're police actions. When we're talking about lynchings, we're talking about people forming up, developing a common plan, and acting in a way that is not just in violation of human rights, it's in violation of every moral that we know of, right? And so we talked about this as a lynching because it absolutely and precisely fits the characteristics of lynching. If you followed the story of Ahmaud Arbery here in the United States, you'll know that the white men who killed him, and we saw a slice of a video that went viral months after his death. You'll know that those people had two trucks. They chased him, they cornered him. They didn't let him out of the neighborhood. He ran into ditches to try to get away from them. They hit him with the truck. They herded him like cattle. They tapped right into this idea of chattel slavery. And then, and only then, did they shoot him, and then the shooter stands over his body and says exactly what you already knew he was gonna say, right? Uses a racial epithet, an obscene language to indicate that he's not only accomplished his mission, but that mission is firmly within the range of racial control. And so this space, right? This space where we're talking about lynching, and if anything, we're underselling what's happening throughout the Black community and what's unbelieved, unless in fact we have video. This is the space that we are inhabiting right now as Black folk, and this is the space that we're tired of, and that your generation is doing an amazing job of leading the protest against. And so this space, right, really relies on the idea that our bodies have been and maybe should be property, that our bodies are subject to white authority and white entitlement, that in fact, the nature of being white is about having the authority and the entitlement to opine on us, to control us, and even to end Black lives, right? And that space, that implicit conversation is driving police brutality, it's driving violence against Black people, it's also driving a massive network of systemic racism. And so I think for us, a lot of us are saying, what does this look like, and how do we, where do we stand in this moment, right? We saw the story of Amy Cooper, and I'm gonna bring it up really quickly, I don't wanna use too much time, but we saw the story of Amy Cooper, the white woman in Central Park, who calls the police on a Black birder, Christian Cooper, and weaponizes her whiteness, performs fear in order to try to deploy a massive state killing machine, right? Knowing full well, she triggers this idea of the Central Park Five, she triggers this idea of white women in peril, right? And then seeks to actually deploy all of these criteria, not just of whiteness, but of white supremacy in service to her inconvenience and displeasure at being asked to put her dog on a leash, right? And so this space in which our bodies and our existences are so casually diminished, right? That's the space that we're in right now, and it's really being uplifted. And so when we stand in this moment, I think it's really important that we ask ourselves the question, are we doing everything we can be doing? And I'm giving a lot of big ups to a generation slightly younger than mine, maybe more than slightly younger than mine, because I think one characteristic of why we're winning, one characteristic of why this is different, one characteristic of why this is working is that we're seeing people being sensitive to everything, to every aspect of people's behavior, of conduct, of lack of conduct, of misconduct that feeds systemic racism. And I thought I would give just a couple of examples in closing, right? And some of these are small, some of these are big. So, you know, I'm sitting in New York City also. I live very close to where a lot of, not just protesting was happening, but also a lot of destruction of property. And some of that was very intentional, right? And certainly a whole bunch of stores whose windows weren't broken were out the next morning, boarding them up, protecting their property, finding chains, finding metal grates. And these spaces, right, which may not have the money to donate, I understand the restaurant industry is struggling. They managed to board up all their property. None of them have managed to make public statements in support of what's happening. And then let's look at people who have made public statements, right? Are they doing enough? And then this is a question I think is being asked right now, needs to keep being asked. Amazon, public statement. You go on Amazon Prime, it says, Amazon says Black Lives Matter. That's great, right? That's powerful. You know what? A lot of my students, a lot of my friends who work for Amazon are massively underwhelmed by the ways in which they have to justify sick days in a COVID epidemic, at the ways in which their working conditions don't match anything remotely humane, right? So in the prior case, we have somebody not making a public statement. In the Amazon case, we have a public statement that doesn't actually do much more than, as my colleague Charo says, anesthetize people to their lack of action and even their complicity in the problem, right? And then we have spaces that justify or legitimize inaction despite their statements, despite their public statements. And I saw a very unfortunate article today that the UN had instructed its staff not to participate in protests. I was reading it right before this forum, and I found it just deeply, deeply disappointing. And many arms of the UN and many UN staff and UN leadership has made strong statements in support of the outrage of people's human rights, of what's going on right now. And so we've seen really strong statements coming out of the UN system. But at the same time, and I think a lot of people here know this better than anybody, how can anyone understand the moment we're in if they're not going to situate themselves inside of it? Is this moment of protest? Is this moment of solidarity? Is this moment of really unpacking racism? Can you understand it if you're not inside of it? And I'll give you a teeny example. Yesterday, there was a bike protest that went by my window. And it was from what I could see, it was mostly white people. And there's been this massive multiracial outpouring of solidarity and protest, and it's been amazing for me to watch. But one of the things they were chanting was Black Lives Matter. And I immediately noticed the difference between the Black demand, Black Lives Matter, and their demand, which they were singing, Black Lives Matter. And I'm not going to say that that is a wholly racialized distinction. I think the chants are what gives us the energy, that's the way we move forward. But the difference between the way that phrase, the way that chant has been mobilized by Black folk as a demand, as an outrage, as a moment, and the way it was very easily converted into song and into something that felt lighter in that moment struck me very deeply as a Black woman. And when I say, how do we stand in this moment? Where do we stand in this moment? The thing I appreciate about this generation, the thing I appreciate about this moment is that we're asking that question, even of our allies, even of ourselves. We're challenging ourselves to understand our commitments to dismantle systemic racism in very granular ways. And that's why we're gonna win.
Thank you, Dominique. Thank you so much. And now if you have comments, questions, now is the time. You can either put them on the side, which is preferred because the speakers can all read them, or you can also raise your hand. I'm so thankful, all three of the panelists, of our sisters, comadres, spoke about the piece of, symbols as a form of silence, the exclusion and the visibility of women. There was also a conversation around what would it take for Black people to be really free. The Black trans people erasure is predominant in most spaces. the erasure of Black women, and state violence should not only be seen as police brutality. It also has to deal with poverty, housing, lack of education, violation of morals is something that's there as well. And then, you know, the performative piece, performance of solidarity, and the historical context of this that has allowed for this to continue and for this to be here. In my personal, and I'm taking facilitator's privilege right now, you know, I see a lot I live in the United States, right? But I see a lot of people, the Latino, Latina, Latinx community now that were silent before, now suddenly they have vidas negras importan. They have Black Lives Matter. And my question is like, where were you before? Where were you before? Oh, but now everybody's Black. And my thing is, if you just found out that you're Black in 2019, you need to sit down and you need to learn, because this can't be. But I see it now. You know, there's a lot of also white people that are like outraged about racism now. You're outraged about racism now, and the role that you played in it now. And then my other piece is, you know, I'm a faculty member at a university. The university has sent out statements, and I've been reading statements from different universities throughout the region. And the statements, most of them don't say that they honor Black lives. They talk about the destruction of property. They talk about the importance of the historical moment. But they do not say specifically that they honor and that they're going to repair the wrong that they've done around Blackness. So then where are the academic, you know, what are the academic institutions doing as well? And that's not only in the United States, that's in the whole region. I've been watching it. The statements don't say anything about Black lives. Vidas negras importan. That statement is nowhere in any statement that I've seen yet. I could be wrong, but that would mean also repairing, right? Acknowledging and repairing a flawed history. And in the region, that would mean acknowledging the racist policies that most institutions have towards Black people and how they don't benefit them. So those are some of my initial thoughts. The performative piece is I feel that we're gonna see it now more than ever. I feel it's gonna increase. And I also know that there are Black people being paid money to do that as well, to sell the performance, which is what we saw yesterday. Like somebody had to authorize that. They had to go to somebody Black to say, like, do you think this is cool? Where can we order some of these? Or that Black person even like found a vendor. Like I keep on thinking, how did that get there? How did that get there? So those are some initial thoughts. Any thoughts from Charo, Dominique, or Janisha to each other in regards to what could be done? How do we strategize? What's a global agenda? And here is where we also, you know, participants can also engage.
I thank you for that, Janvieve. I think I have an initial reaction to what you mentioned about non-Black Latinx people suddenly, not really about suddenly claiming Blackness, but about the show of solidarity that we see. And I think my message, you know, this probably is speaking to the choir, but just as an African American, I think that we often forge these solidarity ties with non-Black people of color through the erasure of non-American Black folks. So I see a lot of African Americans striving for this Black and brown unity narrative that does not in any way include Black Latinos or Black Latin Americans. So I just want to say, I think solidarity that we need has to be one that is forged with Black people, and obviously has to be cross-cultural and beyond borders. And there's a lot of work to do there. You know, like I said, I was talking to Anna this week, and we were talking about feminism and about the hood and about everything that's happening. And I think every time I have a conversation with her, we realize that some of the ways in which we think about things like poverty and Black women's issues have differences, and that's okay, right? It should not be intimidating, but there are bridges to connect with there. But there's this thing that happens, and I push back for African Americans, and I always say, you know, this is great. Yes, if we live in a community with people who are non-Black people of color, then it's natural that we're going to show up for each other when something happens locally. But we have to ask these brown Latinos, what solidarity are you showing with Afro-Latinos? And I say to them, if you're not in solidarity with Black Latin Americans, you can't be in solidarity with me. It has to begin with people in your own ethnicity. So that's my initial thought. I think there is a way in which I feel that some of that Black-brown solidarity narrative has to be rejected for the sake of a true unity, right? Not because we devalue the lives of non-Black people of color, not because we don't see what's happening in these immigration camps and to our Indigenous family, because we want to support them. But we do have to have a Black unity first, I think, before anything else.
Thank you for that. Jamila had her hand up, and then Dominique.
Like in the spirit of solidarity in terms of just talking about it. And one of the things that I think is important when we're, you know, I work in language. I do think our ability to communicate directly is an essential component of what we do. I also think that when we're looking at international coalitions and we think about racism, having a keen understanding that racism is a tool and a strategy, but it is not the purpose, right? Like Black bodies are not brutalized, you know, for no reason. It's done for a very specific reason. And the blueprint in the US context is in the Constitution. We have the 13th, but we also have the 5th Amendment. And private property rights in the United States and what that has done with capitalism and how capitalism has invaded, you know, foreign policy and impacts, you know, colonialism and how, you know, how nations are moving and controlling Black bodies in Black countries and Black economies. That racism is really used as a tool for controlling the property and the resources that Black people have and that many people of color have, but in particular, Black people and Black nations. And when I think about solidarity, I think coming together for economic purposes, like not just defunding the police, but stop funding the system that relies on our resources in order to brutalize us in many circumstances. And so, for example, when I see like Buy Black movements and things like that in the United States, it's very US centric, as in, I like in Spanish, Afro-Estadounidense, because I don't, African American, there's a lot of Americas. We all are African American. But so I think part of the solidarity is allowing us to be a resource to each other, allowing us to, whether if we don't have money, we have time that can save someone money, donating our skills, our resources to Black organizations, and not just the big ones, but the small ones that are really in touch with the communities.
Thank you.
So that's it.
Thank you. I'm gonna take Esther that raised her hand as well, and then Dominique.
Hi, everybody. I'm Esther in Colombia. Thank you so much for all of the interventions. I just wanted to think a little bit about what it means to resist and what it means to be, you know, a human rights defender and a social leader. I think many of you know that here in Colombia, Afro-descendant people who resist racism, who resist state violence and the conflict in general are being persecuted. There's a genocide. Charo's organization, PCN, reported last month 75 social leaders were killed between January and April, and the majority of those are in the Caribbean coast and the Pacific coast, and there's been more this month. And I think that, you know, those people are people who are speaking out against racism, who are mobilizing against the neoliberal economic agenda in their territories, mobilizing against the destruction of culture, of identity, of that link with territory. And what Charo said earlier about kind of seeing this in its historicity, is that the word? Like in its historical context. So it makes us think about enslaved people who rose up against enslavement and were persecuted. And so this has never stopped. And especially women as well, women leaders here in Colombia who are specifically persecuted, who are killed, but also, you know, victims of sexual violence, for being visible social leaders, but also just for being in territories and resisting all that is happening to Black communities. We don't often hear from the US. Well, I was thinking of Marielle Franco as well as an obvious case in Brazil, but we don't often hear about that type of persecution of Black people in the US. And I was just wondering if that is also a dynamic of violence against Black people, those of us who actually stand up against state violence and racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
So maybe I can actually also really just directly address that point as well. To Esther, and hi, it's nice to see you again. Absolutely, yes, right? What we've seen in the US, and so you can go back to the 60s and talk about COINTELPRO, which is a program of the FBI, or you can go back to this year, right? And talk about the way the FBI has created a category called Black identity extremist, and has used it to spy on, to delegitimize, to surveil, to impact many Black lives, and including the founders of Black Lives Matter, right? So you have this category that doesn't exist with respect to any other racial group, but has been used deliberately and affirmatively to try to undercut folk. One of the most recent things, and maybe some of you saw this on the social media, was they had ordered, because of COVID, right? They had ordered these masks that, I know I talk very fast, I'm really trying. They had ordered these masks, and on the masks was printed, "Stop killing Black people," right? And they were for protest, and the idea was that people would be able to wear them. They were seized in the US by the federal government, by the Postmaster General, and the reason given on the tracking, which is impressive, because if you can ever track a package through the postal system here, it's already a miracle. But the reason given on the tracking was seized by law enforcement. And in fact, lawyers had to get involved in order for Black Lives Matter to get the masks they had purchased and paid for. So absolutely, yes. The only other small point I wanted to make, I realize I'm taking up a little too much space here, was that the earlier conversation of Janvieve and Janisha around, and Jamila around solidarity, I just think it's important to also add a layer to that's also the source of our strength. And for me, this comes from a really massive realization I had when I was living and working in Palestine and seeing the ways being forced to engage in conversations about normalization, seeing the ways being forced to explain and to educate to people whose interests weren't aligned with you, actually saps your strength and saps the power of a movement. And so when we're talking about solidarity and about really building that core around Black folk, you're also talking about what does it mean to think about the fact that in the favelas in Brazil, their COVID strategy was just to lock people in and see what happens later, right? And compare that to what Black folk might be experiencing in other countries, right? We can't actually get into the details, into the weeds, into the ways that we understand and are able to articulate and develop the discourse of what racism looks like, right? That's a process. That's a massively difficult process of taking that pain in the pit of your stomach or that uneasiness when someone does a certain kind of thing and translating that into a discourse of social change. That can't be done if we're spending our time educating, particularly in a moment like this, when the resources are out there for anyone who gives a damn to learn them.
Thank you. Thank you, Dominique. We're gonna take Isanet's question, because her hand is raised, and then go back to Janisha to address maybe multiple questions by then.
Thank you, everyone, for all the knowledge that you're giving us. I'm a Black Dominican American person living in the U.S., and I do most of my organizing work within that affinity group, but also with a little bit with people on the island, Black Dominicans and Dominican Haitians. And as a young person in organizing, I'm in my late 20s and have been organizing for a very short 6 years now. I do want to be more involved in Black solidarity work, but sometimes feel like my capacity is short. And so I would love to pose a question to people that have been specifically the Black women that have been organizing for longer. Like, how do I build my capacity to organize and be in actionable solidarity, not just saying I'm in solidarity, but actionable solidarity with Black people, specifically Black women and femmes in Colombia, in Brazil, and just globally, because sometimes I get a little bit distracted by what's happening within my people and within the US. But I do want to I want to stay vigilant to having a global perspective and be able to like hold, I don't want to hold all the pain, but I do want to be able to understand and be aware of it all.
Thank you, Isanet. We're gonna go to Janisha. Maybe Janisha will be able to address several questions. And then I think Charo wanted to say a few things.
I think I was gonna answer Esther's question, I think about retaliation. You were asking about Black organizers here. I just wanted to point out that there have been, I believe, 5 prominent organizers from the Ferguson Rebellion who have been murdered. If you don't know, I believe 4 of them were shot and burned in a car. One was the son of a woman who was an organizer, and he went, if I'm not mistaken, he went out in the evening to get something and didn't come back, and she found him hanged in her backyard. I want to point out that a young man named Ramsey Orta, who is the one who filmed the murder of Eric Garner, was incarcerated shortly afterwards on trumped up charges. And luckily he was released just recently. However, I've been following his case, and I know that while he was incarcerated, he was like constantly harassed and tortured and put in solitary. So there is definite retaliation on the streets here. Especially, we had a march here in the Bronx that was like extremely violent recently. And a lot of the police here react to organizers because they know who people are. They will harass you on purpose. So I think it's different. I don't know that I can say that at this point we have the same type of systematic assassination of activists that you do in Latin America, just because of, there would be a different type of backlash here in the United States, but the repression comes in different ways. It comes with like job loss and, police harassment and, public shaming. And of course, back in the, during the Black Power era, there was more, maybe a more prominent backlash that we saw. I do feel, I invite other people to give their feedback, but I think that the repression is different now. It's not necessarily murder. It's like different types of social repression. And I guess I'll say, just offer something to Isanet's question. Since I am involved in sort of like international solidarity work, it's difficult to know what's happening around the world because there are just so many of us, right? But very simply, I'm in some WhatsApp groups with Black folks that I've been able to connect with around the world who are organizers. And one of the things that we just do constantly is share articles and share news about what's happening. And it's a simple way to be involved. That helps us know when someone has a petition that we can sign internationally, when we should talk to, diplomats in our country. So I think for me personally, the connections we have are still tech-based. And, some of us, I do also travel internationally and build with people globally, but, we can only take trips for a couple of weeks because we have jobs and things like that. But I think at this stage, it seems like there's just a tremendous amount of information sharing. And so, even from this gathering that we have right here, I know we have women here from different countries. We could potentially formulate a WhatsApp group where we just share the news about what's happening so we can stay involved. And I think highlighting that and sharing that information with other Black people in the United States has been key to the work that I'm doing. It helps to lift people's consciousness and to understand that Black people around the world are suffering. And I hear you, obviously, when you're being gunned down in your backyard, it's sometimes difficult to remember who else is being gunned down. But just sharing information has been very key for my work.
Thank you, Janisha. Charo?
Um, I'm struggling here with different things because I'm from an organization that work, and I'm part of that work of building up networks of solidarity. And we have a principle. We understand and believe that we are, as we struggle here, we are part of the struggles in the world, all the struggles for social and racial justice, and that we are part of a broader problem, that we have our small problems, but we are part of broader, bigger problems, more structural, more complicated. And but we ask for solidarity a lot, no? And when things like what is happening in the United States appear, the question is how we perform now solidarity, how we do that reciprocal solidarity that we try to promote. And the real thing is that one thing is solidarity and the other is to struggle together. And to me, what we really need now, more than solidarity, is to struggle together. I can write a letter in support, I can put out a statement, and we can bring a bunch of people to the streets and put signs and say that Black Lives Matter and that we don't want more people killed. And, you know, we could do a few of those things. But then we go back home and this situation continues. And what we see from our point of view of struggle is how we continue with stepping forward transformations, real changes, you know, structural changes. And understanding that while we struggle here to prevent that Black people is killed, right? We understand that no bloody genocide that is happening around the world. This where we are excluded from all kind of services, where the gaps, economic gaps between the rest and us is huge, where we are not only, our physical lives are not only taken, but also our spiritual and cultural and essence lives are taken. And we have no real life that is our own. So I think that we need to think on a step up forward in the discourse and the action, from solidarity to acting together, to building up cross-country, transnational movement that think on more structural transformations, structural changes. I hear here constantly, because in the context of Latin America and all these notions of coloniality, that this is a civilization in crisis, or crisis civilization, or la crisis civilizatoria, which means really that what is happening is that effectively capitalism and all this neoliberal system is kind of shaking, and we are seeing certain level of crisis that implies that we have to change the form of life. And the real challenge is that, you know, how we are going to change the actual form of life to one where actually we don't need to expose ourselves, our bodies, our souls, our lives, to announce that our lives matter, you know? And the challenge to me is that we struggle here to keep territories, to possess collectively those territories, to build up different kinds of economies, but then there is the privilege and the conform of capitalism, and how we convert that and we give it up to certain of those privileges to build up in something different. How we really work toward changing this form, actual form of life, of living, better to say. To me, we need to build that more on organization and community, and definitely building up transnational cross-borders movements to don't talk so much about solidarity, but being struggling together, because what we need really is, start building up to be a real Black front that struggle to defend the life of Black people anywhere, wherever it is. And that we get to the level that when a person, Black person, anywhere in this world is hurt, I feel it. Because my ancestors feel it and are telling me that. So we gotta step up to that level where we really feel, no, when we see a guy struggling with the, no, when we see something that is absolutely shocking, like those ones, but when we have the total sensibility to feel, that even an image and a picture that is racializing and insulting some Black person hurt us like if they were taking our life away. I think that's the challenge we have.
Thank you so much, Charo, Dominique, and Janisha for this. Folks, read the comments as well. There's a lot of good comments and reflections that have been on the side regarding some of the academic institutions, the piece around solidarity, resistance in the region. So please take a look at the sidebars. For me, I don't see Isanet, but one of the questions that she asked, and also linked a little bit to Esther's question, I'm having, like, for me personally, I'm having a really rough time right now, because of as a Black woman that has been involved in these struggles since I'm 14, 15. I feel for the first time in my life that I'm being held back, that I'm being restrained. And it's simply because I'm a mother. I will say that, because I feel like if I weren't a mother, I would be on the streets more, because my relationship to my health would be a little bit different. I would have to only think about myself, right? But now I have to think about my children and my partner and their well-being, and not only their physical well-being, but their emotional well-being. I have a 9-year-old that is scared to go out now, that knows that he's going to, that is very clear that he's Black, and that knows that he's going to be growing up. And he's already stated that he doesn't want to get killed. And he's not watching the news because we don't, he's not watching the news, but he knows, because they're asking us questions, and we don't lie to the children. So we share what's happening in the world. And they've been to Panama and they've seen conditions. They've been to Colombia, they've seen conditions. So, so these are real things. And, Dominique, you kept, and I think Dominique and I are around the same age. I do not think that we're much different in age and generations. But and Ayansi says, what about me? And Ayansi's 7. She's right here listening as well. But I feel now that I'm in this moment where a lot of my organizing is done virtually. And to me, that's a new world. And I'm navigating it with grace from Anna and from Marie, that are younger than I am, right? And being pushed to do different things that are outside of my comfort. And they're real outside of my comfort. Like, these calls are outside of my comfort. I'm getting used to them now. But the real struggle is, and then there's a gender piece to it too. My partner, Omar, cis hetero man, he went to do jail support for the folks that were arrested illegally here in the Bronx. And that's a real sacred space. And that's a space that I think I should have been at as well. We should have been at together, because folks coming out, we don't know what they need. They might need hugs. They might need just embraces, folks that they can cry. You know, we had mothers coming out, but again, because of this piece around my children, I did not feel comfortable going, and I have to work on how I feel comfortable, but working hard behind the scenes. So there's so that's just where I am in regards to this conversation. It's taken me a lot of shifting on how I've been used to be doing things. My family in Panama, surprised that I'm not on the streets. They're like, I'm sure I was gonna see you marching. I was like, how?
This is, I mean, the thing to me, I'm sorry, I have to jump into it, because I think we need to refrain two things. One, that the struggle is only on the streets.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are two places of struggle. One is you take a gun, and there are different trincheras, right? What is that in dictionary? What is that in English? So once you take a gun and go to the street and confront and get, and fight physically and get into war. And the other is also the one where we are building up conditions to get where we need to get, because we have seen also the confrontation when you pretend to take power, but you don't even understand and are ready to take that power, and then you don't know what to do. And the point is, if we are really building the basis and the conditions where we actually understand, the matrix of power, and understand how to transform those forces of power, and then how to gain power. That goes to education, that goes to personal transformation and strength, that goes to community building, that goes to so many things that need to be built and need to be done from different places. So the struggle is everywhere, and we can do it from many, many different places and positions. But the other thing is that being a mother is as revolutionary as being on the streets.
Mm-hmm.
You are taking care and educating human beings that are going to follow your steps tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that take your flag tomorrow when you are held down and continue going, because this is not for today or for tomorrow. This is a long process, and you are doing your job, and you don't need to be on the streets on certain places because you are in the place that you need to be right now. And I'm pretty sure that at some point, your partner will take the step and take the kids, and you go and do something else that you are doing. Should be that way. But even if it's not that way, I think that those are also the challenges that we as women have been revolutionary, pretending to revolt, to transform, to change. And to me, when I become a mother, my first responsibility and challenge is to make sure that that child that I bear is going to be good for this struggle, or better don't be.
Yeah, thank you for that. So folks, we could go on until 6 o'clock if we could. I know I could. So I just want to bounce it back to Janisha and Dominique again for some closing, thoughts, next steps. What do you see happening? Encouragement words.
I think I really appreciate the space that Black women hold for each other. And I appreciate the vulnerability that's been expressed here. Janvieve, I also, I appreciate how you are talking about motherhood. I do think that the identity of a revolutionary is always someone who is without a child, someone who's single, right, without a partner. And we have to obviously unpack what it means to be a freedom fighter, so that we can do the work that we're called to do. But I also really, really embrace what Charo mentioned. Obviously, the work is multifaceted. It's not just about being in the streets, but we do love that energy that we get from being outside. So, I'm thinking right now of this image that I've seen of, some of you have probably seen online, but it's of an Indigenous woman from somewhere in South America, and she's walking around with like an assault rifle strapped to her shoulder, and she's also breastfeeding at the same time. I mean, you've seen that image, but it comes to mind in these moments. But I think my closing thought is just that we're on the right pathway. Like, these tender conversations are the tools that we need to weave the bonds that will break the system that we live in. So I think it would be great if there is a way that these conversations, I mean, I know you're having a whole week of conversations with AfroResistance, but, potentially, Janvieve, maybe this is, maybe we can have a WhatsApp group or something else where we can continue to do some of the technical building that we need. Facebook is obviously monitored, but WhatsApp or some other platform, I can also help you think about what it means, Janvieve. But I think what I hear from many people here, and what I sense even from some of the side conversations that I see, is just a need to be in closer bonds with revolutionary Black women who are trying to envision the future. So how do we keep that closeness together? What technology can we use? And obviously we have all of these. I mean, there are 4 of us who are the speakers today, but I think there are like 50 people in this room. And so I know all of you are brilliant, and I want to hear what you have to say and what your thoughts and ideas are. So I would love to continue that. And I think that even if it doesn't happen immediately with AfroResistance, like, find women who are near you and connect, and just let's begin building and organizing around the things that we know that we need. Women's voices are very important to revolutionary work, because we are never just thinking about the fight. We're always thinking about our children. We're thinking about food. We're thinking about the land. We're thinking about home. And honestly, we're always envisioning a type of revolution that is holistic, that sometimes men just don't envision, right? And so our voices are very central, because we're really always thinking about building a new world, not just fighting back against our oppressor. And so we need us very much. So I think my word of encouragement is for us to just continue to be badass Black women in the struggle, and to stay bonded and connected. It's time for us to do the unsexy work of building. The protest is it's sexy. I love being in the streets with my signs, but I was in Senegal at a similar conference, where folks from the diaspora were invited to come and build with folks from across the continent. And we had a lot of difficult, hard, painful conversations about what happens when African Americans travel throughout the African continent, about entitlement, and about also what happens when continental Africans come to the US and bring their own xenophobia and like anti-African Americanness. And it wasn't the sexy work, it wasn't the fun work, but we did it and we got through it. And I'm still connected to those folks, you know what I mean? So my mind has been changed, their minds have been changed, and that's where the work is right now. So I just encourage us to stay close and to do that work we always know we can do as women.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really hear that. And I'm just going to take a second to express my appreciation for the richness and the power of this conversation and its convening. And to be super honest, what it's giving me personally right now, and the deep, deep feeling of peace and contentedness that I'm leaving this moment with. And I guess maybe I could reflect back 2 small things. One of them is just the struggle of where to position yourself in this moment, how to do all that you can do. And there's been many nights in this past couple weeks where I've heard protests going by my house, and I've been chained to my computer, putting out a policy document about racial justice that somebody might read or somebody might not read, but right, and telling myself that doing whatever I can do to create analysis as tools for civil society advocates is a priority, and a priority that that uses and showcases my ability to contribute to its maximum. And so I think that struggle between where we put our bodies, where we put our mind, where we put our energy in this moment is very personal, but I also don't think there's a wrong answer. I really want to uplift what Charo said. And I think in that vein, this space, that the best of us and the best of what we do really comes from love, and really comes from our deepening and our adding complexity to our understanding of love is really important to succeeding. For me, I'm a lesbian, and a lot of women's coming out stories that I've heard started with having a child and knowing that they couldn't raise their child without being truthful about who they were. They couldn't raise a child who they would be able to give at the level they wanted to give as parents without being truthful with the world and with themselves about who they really were. And I think that space of just understanding how much of our love is connected to justice, is connected to truth, really enriches the ways in which we imagine possibilities for community. And maybe one quick quote, there's a book that Ta-Nehisi Coates writes about anti-slavery and the abolition of enslavement in American history in one of his novels. And he talks about his frustration, that the lead character, who is a formerly enslaved African, talks about his frustration dealing with and partnering with white abolitionists, and says they would lay down their lives for me. They would lay down their lives for this cause of slavery. Their hatred of slavery is so deep. Their hatred of enslavement is so deep that they would die for it. But it doesn't come with any love for the slave, right? And for me, and that's a quote, I know we're shifting away from language, slavery, slave, right? But for me, that insight comes with the acknowledgement that our remedies have been limited, because too much of them have been from people in power who may hate the idea of injustice or the idea of hypocrisy to our values, but don't necessarily love us, love our communities, love their vibrancy, love who we are in a way adequate to see us. And that's really the reason I appreciate this conversation, because the deep love and the complexity of that I hear here is incredibly powerful.
Thank you, Dominique. Charo, do you have any closing comments? No? Okay, gracias. All right, folks, we are at the end of our first call for this week. Anna, I want to first thank, so there are folks that are behind the scenes, behind AfroResistance, right? And I want to really thank Fernanda and Swahili that have been holding it down for interpretation. Interpretation is usually something that we don't see interpreters usually. They're blanked out, they're somewhere else. So, and folks make them invisible, not AfroResistance. AfroResistance, our interpreters are just as important as anybody else. So they're here with us. And we really center and we honor Black interpreters because they understand the cultural translations, the silent ones, and they know how to put words to them where others just don't. Like the song thing that Dominique explained earlier on, how that has translated. I want to thank Marie for doing our media and communications coordinator, for really doing the technical behind the scenes of this as well. And we have been figuring these calls out as we go along, and I feel now that we're at a point where they're smoother and really great. And that is all Marie and her doing. And I want to thank Ana Barreto, who is the mistress mind behind this. And Anna has been really designing and curating all these calls for the past 3 months. So I want to give her a lot of credit and honor in doing that work. And I want to also invite her to explain what's going to happen for the rest of the week.
Thank you, Janvieve. Well, thank you, everybody. This is really a feeling that is really like inside me. I feel that on the historical moments that they're going back. And that's exactly what I feel that this series is. So, and also it's an opportunity to understand that the war against Black people is global, and also offer folks a different approaches and understanding that the same thing is happening in other countries around the world. So tomorrow we will have a talk with all. This is a women series, so that's also important. And tomorrow we'll have some friends countries. So we have Uganda, we have Charo, that also works with AfroResistance and doing moderation. We have Evelyn. I think I saw Evelyn here, so she's also here in the call. About the same topic. The idea is to have different people talking about the same topic, kind of building these international strategies together.
Oh, I think Anna just froze a little bit. Oh no, she was done. All right. Well, with that, Marie, maybe we can put on the original song that we put on at the beginning to close us out. And we will be here tomorrow. Please consider donating for AfroResistance so we can keep on doing this work, as well as, you know, we spoke about paying interpreters. We really want to honor that and be able to pay interpreters for their work. And then we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.
Me deixa cuidar do meu menino. Me deixa ensinar o meu menino a se amar. Me deixa abraçar o meu menino. Sem o sorriso dele eu vou chorar. Oh mamãe, cadê você? Oh filho, tô trabalhando. Oh mamãe, onde cê tá? Meu filhinho tô carregando o peso do mundo aqui nas costas. Já tô indo te encontrar. A mãe guerreira tá na rua, lutando pra respirar. Me deixa cuidar do meu menino, pretinho, pretinho. Meu sopro de vida é meu menino, pretinho, pretinho. Se você olhar pro meu menino, vai ver que ele brilha mais que o sol. Não sei como pode o ser humano dos meninos não ter dó. Me deixa cuidar do meu menino, pretinho, pretinho. Meu sopro de vida é meu menino, pretinho, pretinho. Se você olhar pro meu menino, vai ver que ele brilha mais que o sol. Não sei como pode o ser humano dos meninos não ter dó. Oh mamãe, deixa eu dizer, essa culpa não é sua. Oh mãezinha, venha cá, seu sorriso é dom, é cura. Iabá, 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 iabá. Quem é que cuida da mamãe? Quem é que cuida do menino? Quem é que cuida do papai? Se a branca paz não vê menino. Me deixa cuidar do meu menino. Meu sopro de vida é meu menino. Se você olhar pro meu menino, vai ver que ele brilha mais que o sol. Não sei como pode o ser humano dos meninos não ter dó.